Your study is called Making the Best Use of Existing Data. What is the work that you are doing with your research group for this study?
В рамках темы А исследовательская группа занимается...
Within the framework of making the best use of existing data, the research team has been collecting data from a number of surveys of the Russian population. These surveys have been about Russian health, and data about various risk factors has been collected in the surveys, right up to the present day. Now we have collected about 30 files on this topic. This data represents an overall survey of the health of the population of Russia, which has been done since the late 70s up to quite recently. We collect this data, then we harmonize it. That is, we need to make sure that the data from different surveys are comparable to each other and that they can be analyzed together. This is the first area of work. In the second area of work, we are dealing with official statistics on mortality, with the most detailed data since the 1950s. In addition, there is the third area of work, where we are analyzing the first and second blocks of data. Currently, the work is carried out by a group that works in the Higher School of Economics at the International Laboratory of Population and Health. This group of researchers includes both experienced researchers and young researchers who prepare PhD theses and do all this work. Everyone has their own task, and they get experience at the international level. One of the research questions for the project is, are differences in mortality rates real? How is your research group going to answer this question?
Как многие, наверное, знают, между...
As many people probably know, there is a large gap in mortality and overall life expectancy between Russia and most of the economically developed countries. The question is how much we can believe in official mortality statistics from which all these indicators are calculated. This is not an idle question, because in many countries of the world, including Russia, there are problems with the correct registration and coding of the causes of death. For example, is it true that the mortality from cardiovascular diseases in Russia is so high, as is recorded by official statistics? Or alternatively, is it the case that death from some other cause is recorded instead as being due to a cardiovascular disease? Recently, we have also started to consider the possibility that in some regions of Russia, the mortality in the oldest people is underestimated. This is a significant issue for people who are 80, 90, and even 100 years old, because the overall number of people who live to these advanced ages is very important for planning the work of health and social services. These people require a lot of resources in terms of health and social services. We need to be able to predict this group of people with a high degree of accuracy. For example, in Moscow, we have very, very low mortality rates in these population groups. We think that these figures are unrealistic. Firstly, this may be due to the fact that the age of these people is incorrectly determined. That is, their age according to current documents, such as a passport, does not correspond to their actual biological age. Secondly, there is the fact that people who have long since left Moscow or Russia can still be registered and form the so-called group of immortals. That is, a person who died 20 years ago in some other part of the former Soviet Union, or maybe even abroad, such as somewhere in New York, is still listed as living in Moscow. These are all questions that we need to clarify so that we can come to more realistic estimates of mortality in the elderly. The primary issue, of course, is the correct registration of the causes of death. This is because determining the correct reasons for the excessively high mortality of the Russian population will affect the direction of the healthcare efforts and the state as a whole to prevent and reduce mortality. What types of data do you use in your research, and why is your study important for the project?
Мы используем для проекта 3 вида данных.
We use 3 types of data for the project. First, there is so-called microdata. This is data on individuals that has been collected at different times, in which people have identified their socio-demographic characteristics, such as their standard of living, prosperity, and housing conditions. On the other hand, people talk about their health and any symptoms that they might have. In addition, within the microdata, there is data on biomedical measurements, growth, weight, and sometimes electrocardiogram and electrocardiogram parameters, as well as blood pressure, biochemical indicators, and others. This is the first data block. At present, approximately 30 files with microdata have been collected. The second type of data is mortality data at the level of the whole population. These are detailed causes of death classified by age or sex over many years and in the different regions of the Russian Federation. Finally, we have data that we use for comparison, namely data from other countries. This data includes 2 levels, microdata and population data. This is the data circle with which we work.